I think in all great ballet companies there is extraordinary talent to be found in the underrepresented communities in a city. The arts is really a wonderful job, and people don't always see it as something that is obtainable for everybody, and it is.
Houston Ballet has always been at the vanguard of inclusion, diversity, equity, and access. This scholarship is important because it's putting action behind our ideas and our ideals.
Lauren Anderson, she has this way of making you feel accepted and able to be your best self. She's like my ballet fairy godmother. This scholarship is an extension of her magic. It's her being a fairy godmother to the next generation of students.
To have this scholarship named after me means everything. I mean, I only trained at the Houston Ballet Academy. This place is home. This is where I've always felt safe. This is where I could really be me. This is where my dreams came true. This will give some young dancer an opportunity to reach further than they ever knew they could go. I had no idea that I would ever be good enough to be a principal dancer. If I'd written the story, I wouldn't have written it as well as it turned out. So I would hope that this would just open the door for that type of story to be written, bigger and better than the student could have ever imagined. I'm honored to present the very first Lauren Anderson Young Dancer Scholarship to Eric Best.
I guess we just thought I should start the dance talk crying. Yeah, I've seen that video a lot of times, and it gets me every time. So if you haven't, I heard some people reacting to the video in a way that maybe you hadn't heard yet about this scholarship fund. And I would say probably everybody in the audience at least knows about the legacy of Lauren Anderson. And if you, like I, have had the privilege of seeing her work with young people in the studios upstairs and also in Kappa gymatoriums around Houston, you know that there is no better person to sort of pay it forward for this art form. There's no one better to honor as we strive to create the next generation of dancers. So I hope you'll consider joining me in supporting this scholarship. All right, I'm going to ask my illustrious panel to come up, and then I will introduce them and get us started. It is great to see you all. It's been a while since we've been together in this way. So welcome back, welcome home, welcome to all our dance. I like to call us, this collection of people, our dance nerds, all of us who love to talk about, we love to see ballet, but we also love to talk and think and reflect about ballet. And you guys are part of the dance nerd team tonight. Lucky you. All right, so I wanted to just remind you, if you were, on February, I want to say it was like the 20th, 2020, we did a dance talk in here just prior to what was then called the Forged in Houston program. And it is this exact same program that we're now calling the Pretty Things program that premieres next week. In that dance talk, we had Trey McIntyre and some of the dancers from his piece really digging into that piece and his creative process. So we're not going to do that so much tonight, but I do encourage you to go back and look at that because there's tons of great stuff there. And just a reminder, again, to those of you who may not know, Trey like the dancers on this panel, was a product of the Houston Ballet Academy, moved into the company, became a choreographic associate, and did some of his first ballets here before going on to create his own company and choreograph on companies around the world. So we're very proud of him as a Houston Ballet alum in all the ways, and he's a very engaging, fun person to listen to. So do check that out. Tonight we're going to talk about all three of these ballets. Before we get started, if you would just remember to silence your noise-making devices. And if you need to leave at all during the dance talk, that is obviously completely fine. We just ask that you use the doors that are to the right and left of the seating area, just so we can, for continuity of our conversation. And so with that, I'm excited to turn to my left. I don't need to introduce this person, but I'm going to anyway. Connor Walsh is the Fondren Foundation Principal Dancer. He joined the company from the Houston Ballet Academy in 2004. He was promoted to Soloist in 2006 and Principal Dancer in 2007. He was an original cast member in all 3 ballets and will perform in One and One and Pretty Things next week. So welcome to Connor. To his left, you sat in the order of my notes. Thank you. That's great. Bridget Kuhns joined Houston Ballet from the Academy as well, and she came into the company in 2013. She was promoted to Demi Soloist in 2016 and to Soloist in 2017. All of these dancers know all of these ballets, but next week she will perform the mother character in Christopher Bruce's Hush. So welcome to Bridget. And for the 3rd time tonight, I get to say, Chandler Dalton was also a student in the Houston Ballet Academy and a member of HB2 before joining the company in 2016. He was promoted to Demi Soloist in 2021, and he will perform in Pretty Things. Yes, please welcome Chandler. Okay, I figure we'll go in the order of the program, and we're going to start with One and One. Connor, I want to start with you because you were in the original cast, and this work was created on you. And you've danced it multiple times, both here in Houston and we toured it to New York. And I wondered, this is our only ELO ballet in our repertoire. What is distinctive about his movement vocabulary?
Tough question, because in this ballet, the movement vocabulary seems sort of endless. We go from doing the most classical, traditional style of movement to then popping and locking like a hip-hop dancer, to then trying to be as fluid and as loose as the most stunning contemporary dancers. I think that just comes from Jorma's enthusiasm for life. If you've ever met him or seen him in the studio, he is just, he pretty much is like playing tennis the whole time he's in the studio, constantly bouncing on his feet. And has more energy than any of the dancers can bring into the room. It's just incredible. And I just think he's somebody who loves dance, and he loves ballet, and I think I can't speak to all of his career, but I know he spent a lot of time at Netherlands Dance Theater. And so I think he loves to combine a lot of what he experienced there, the more contemporary world, with the capabilities of the classical dancers. So yeah, he basically just tries to take everything he knows and everything he enjoys, jumble it up and throw it all together and see how it comes out.
You're really saying, he's fusing the classicism with more contemporary elements. And I do have a slide up. It's a moment from your pas de deux with Karina. And I wondered if you could sort of highlight some examples from that pas de deux that will give the audience sort of things to look for, those moments of, we're classical, oops, we're switching over here. What that fusion, what can we look for?
Sure, I mean, there's simple movements that Jorma's always sort of using, and that's, just like this kind of like you're dancing around and sort of loosing, popping, and locking. So Karina will be doing the most gorgeous articulation of her foot with the heel forward, sliding her point shoe into a gorgeous piqué arabesque of the most classical standard. And the next thing you know, she'll turn in and collapse everything and then be completely loose and bizarre in formation. So I think it kind of, it happens quite suddenly, but I think that's the part that's enjoyable, to see that sense of you never know what's going to come next, you never know how he's going to tie all these ideas together.
So for you two, Bridget and Chandler, you came to this piece after Connor did. What is each of you, what's your impression of the piece, and how does it compare for you to other contemporary ballets that we have in the repertoire?
Yeah, this one has the feedback. The first time I learned this piece, actually, I was an apprentice in the company. That was the last time we had done it, and then this is now the next time we have done it since my time. And I've learned the same part, so it's kind of been nice to visit it. I've never performed it, but it's a good challenge no matter what, just to like test yourself with a new movement quality and to work your body in a new way. And I think just kind of going along the lines of what we've been talking about, like it's really a good challenge to push yourself to strive to be classical in a contemporary, very quirky, weird sort of way. There's one moment that I really like actually, and it's the part that I learned, and it's the Connor character goes around and she's just doing beautiful little échappés and he's like bouncing around like he has like 2 basketballs, and but she's in the middle, like nothing is phasing her. So it's really cool to try to like keep your composure in the quirkiness of the ballet, which is what I love.
Yeah, I think they both explained it really well. I think with this pas de deux in particular I learned, and it's like there's some movements where like literally balancing on one leg while holding your partner, which is kind of, it's very different than any other pas de deux I've ever learned or practiced. So like, it's still classical, but then like, there's still like these quirky, like almost acrobatic, like movements that go along with the classical ballet. And I feel like that's probably like the biggest difference that I've ever, with other contemporary ballets and just ballets in general, with this one in particular.
It's the challenging partnering.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, okay. So what is the relationship, would you say, between the choreography and the music? Because the music is classical, hands down.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, again, Jorma sort of just loves that contrast, to have, you know, women in these tutus and then to be kind of bouncing around like they're hip-hop dancers in a little circle, like the sort of irony of it, the playfulness. In Jorma's process, you know, every choreographer is very different. Some people use the music as an absolute outliner. You know, they come into the studio and they know exactly what instrument they're going to use. And I think Jorma, of course, does a lot of preparation, but there's a lot of play. There's a lot of experimentation that happens in the studio. And then he says, okay, what is our movement? What is our vocabulary? And then we do cutting and pasting. And then we'll sort of, from that process of developing movement, then we'll say, okay, let's see where we can insert that. And then you're like, okay, well, that's not going to fit there, but we're going to remember that step for later because we like that. And so it is, rather than using the music to motivate every step, he creates a lot of, at least in this process, I can't speak to every process for him, but he plays and then figures, okay, how can we make this stuff that we played and we created together work with this music?
Does the playtime, is it driven by the music at all, or is it imagery that he brings in, he folds the music in later?
I mean, through this process, he brought the music in later. I mean, it was always present, but it was not necessarily the driving force, right? Perhaps it was for him in his preparation, getting into that, the brightness and the playfulness of Mozart, how dynamic and crisp it is. That is definitely absolutely reflected in the music. So it's not to say it's an unmusical work. It's just where the music drives and where the music it comes into the process.
So one of the things I love about this program is it's all contemporary work, but they're all really, they fall on different places in the continuum of dance, which all the way on one end is abstract ballet, and the other end would be a story ballet. And they all fall in different places. And I wonder, where does this one fall? You've talked about it being playful, but there's not really an emotional narrative, is there?
Not that I'm aware of. I know, but Jorma will say, there'll be one moment where Karina and I will do a promenade, at the end of the pas de deux, and we face each other, and we're sort of spinning, and all of a sudden, he will want that moment for you to be telling the story of your life, and be like, look into the eyes are so important, and he will ask you to live that moment like there has been 3 acts of ballet leading up to that moment. And then we're like pop-and-locking the next second. So, but there is that. He wants that sense of personality and he wants that authenticity. But it is an absolute abstract ballet that is driven by music and moments rather than, a constant thread of narrative.
Yeah, and the idea of bodies in space together is we all will probably watch it and come away with different feelings at different moments, because that just happens when you see human bodies connect. All right, Let's switch gears and talk a little bit about Christopher Bruce's Hush. I'm assuming it doesn't have a story that has like once upon a time and the end, or happily ever after at the end. It's definitely is much more driven by emotions and relationships. And I just wondered if you all could talk about who are these people, why are they clowns, and what is their relationship to one another?
So the beautiful thing about Hush is they're just a family. And like you were saying, there isn't really a story per se, but it's really just about a family dynamic and how a mother takes care of her children and how a father plays and throws a little girl around, and then the younger brothers are out messing with bugs, and the oldest daughter is like, I'm too cool for the whole family. I want to go and do my own thing, So it has its story, but it's not a story, It's just real life in a sense for this family. And they're just clowns because they're clowns. There's not really a reason that's ever presented in the night as to why they're clowns. It just lifts and that's who we are, and then the curtain closes and that's who we were the whole time we were on stage. And it's really, the real challenge with Christopher Bruce's work is to not overdo it. So even though you are a character, I'm a mother, there's a younger daughter or a younger son, the movement dictates your emotion in a way. You don't have to do too much to kind of add to the story at all. And so that's actually a challenge for us as people who do story ballets, and you're Carabosse or you're Giselle or you're a prince, and you can find your emotions and do what you want. And for him, he's really less is almost more. He choreographs things so well and they're so thought out and precise that you don't have to really do anything to it, which is harder than it sounds, actually.
I wonder if that was one of the reasons why you're all in clown makeup, because you do, to really honor the clown makeup, you have to strip away those facial expressions that you are so used to using.
Yeah, and I mean, there are definitely moments where we do have expression, and he definitely allows that and enjoys it, but it really is, we are just humans, and we are just portraying our emotions through our movement, which when you watch him, we actually had the luxury just last week of having a Zoom rehearsal with Chris, which is kind of funny because he's not the most technological savvy man. So he was over in England and he rented a studio and it was really dark there, and he was like, I'm hungry, it's almost dinner time, but he was in the studio he was in his studio for 2 hours, and it was just, even watching him half do his movement, you can see exactly what it is that he's trying to create and what it is he's trying to get us to do. He's just so clear and precise, but yet simple in the way he carries himself in his movement, and I think it's a good challenge for us to try to translate that onto our bodies.
Yeah, I'm just gonna add that there are these clowns, and the vocabulary, the style of acting is like a mime in a sense that you're completely dry, but then you will have expression, but often the expressions are sort of choreographed. They're inserted just like the movement. And I remember the first ballet I learned of Chris's was Rooster, and I went in there and I thought it was a jazz dance. And I was like, hey, yeah, cast me in the dance. And was using my face so much, and I did not get casted because I was not understanding that the narrative is told through the vocabulary, through the physicality, rather than just through the facial expression. So I was putting all my attention and emphasis in the wrong place. And that's why using this mime vocabulary is so perfect for, it's such a beautiful combination for Chris to work with, because he is so minimal in the sense of his theatrical quality, but it is absolutely a theatrical piece, So it's a perfect little marriage.
So, Bridget, you play the mother, and I know that there's some imagery in her solo. I mean, probably in the other sections too, but that's the one I'm more familiar with, where we can, you're talking about the gestures, the sort of indication movements that tell us who she is. Can you talk a little bit about that? Or any imagery he may have given you?
Yeah, the big thing for the mother is just she's everywhere. As moms are, they're doing everything all the time, whether the family knows it or not, whether she knows it or not. She's just doing it. It's an autopilot, slightly out-of-body experience. So he's really worked with me on almost making the movement involuntary. it's happening to me instead of me doing it, because that's kind of how mothers are. It's just this intuition they have. I need to do this, I need to go do that. But at the same time, they're thinking about, oh, this one time when I was a young girl, I was in a field, but she's like scrubbing dishes over here, like doing something. And you see it throughout her whole solo, throughout the pas de deux. There's a lot of really cute moments. I say cute because it's the mother and father are like about to have a moment together. The kids are all asleep, but then the kids wake up and mom's like, nope, go away. I gotta go take care of the kids. And there's like about to be, and she just immediately snaps out of it and goes and does what she needs to do to be a mom. So it's a really, I mean, he does a great way of just like portraying that relationship and how a mother behaves, because that's who she is, not because she has to, which is really lovely.
What about you two and the characters that you play? Can you talk a little bit about who they are? And
yeah, I feel like the older brother, there's a lot of like sort of like looking off into the distance. Like he's sort of like out of that young age going into like really discovering the world. And I think like the way he kind of looks at like his mother and like awe, and then also with his brother, he's just like curious as to why people are doing or acting the way that they are. And with the way Christopher Bruce's movement like really captures that, and like I almost feel like in a way the characters also maybe have some sort of like animalistic quality. And with the older brother, like I almost think of like a little like prairie dog in a way. I don't know why, that's just what I think of, but and like how they're like always like looking off into the distance and just like really just discovering the world for the like almost in a new way than they had before.
It's absolutely right. I mean, Ian Cassidy was the original, and he inserted all these sorts of moments, because there's some downtime when the cast is on the side or we watch each other, and a lot of times dancers sort of put these in themselves. Chris also, I'm sure, guided him in that way, but the beginning of the solo that Chandler was referencing is the end of the pas de deux between the mother and the father, and the way he sort of looks at them and watches them, it's like he's becoming a man, and he's seeing his parents for the first time in a different light. And then, as Chandler's saying, when he's going off, it's like he's looking off into the distance, ready to grow up and leave the pack. I mean, I like the dog reference. It's sort of in the music too. But it's like he's almost ready to leave the pack, but then the mom turns around and says like, hey, come back. And so, okay. And then he goes back to the pack. So there is that sense that of becoming a man. Still loves to play with his little sister and his little brother, but that sense of almost growing out of that, but not quite. Yeah, so many beautiful dynamics in that ballet.
It's beautiful. And I think everyone can, it's interesting, when I saw it for the first time, you can't not have an emotional reaction to it in some capacity, because we all have a family dynamic. It's not the same necessarily what you're portraying, but there's just a way to connect to it as a human, even if you're not a dancer, I think.
And I think the dance is very much a celebration of Chris's family. I mean, I think it is, and I don't know this if it's a true dedication, but I think the ballet is really for his wife, in the mother solo, how much she does, how thoughtful, but like how it's like an instinct. I think it's, it is there for his wife and a reflection of the love he has for her.
I saw that. Mm-hmm.
Like, hey,
yeah. It didn't
You're
go
amazing.
unnoticed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So unlike ELO, where we have only one, we have 12 Christopher Bruce ballets. Is there such a thing as a typical Bruce ballet, and is Hush that?
In a way, it is, because he does have a very clear movement style. There are themes in his movement, particular moves that you'll see through all of his ballets. But each one in themselves is very unique. The only one that I feel like this somewhat reminds me of, and this is like 2%, it reminds me maybe of Ghost Dances, in the sense of it is a story of a family. We kind of see them in passing in a moment of their life, and then they go and they leave. And that's what kind of happens in this one as well. This like, you see them, they're on stage, we do our bit, and then as the curtain's closing, you can clearly tell we're leaving and we're going somewhere else. So in that sense, it kind of reminds me of that, but they're all so unique and individual in their own way, which is very special of him.
You mean like when the curtain comes up, we just have a glimpse of that, like there's life for the people in this ballet before and after we happen to have our glimpse? Is that
yes, absolutely. Like, it's definitely clear that we've been traveling and we decide, oh, let's sleep here for the night. And then when the sun comes up, we're like, we got to keep going, got to move on to the next town or find our next place to be, And of course, he's never explicitly said that that's what it is, but you kind of get a sense that that's what it is.
Yeah, he's a master of I've always said he's a master of transition in that way. He uses silence and connects movements of dance, because he often uses using pop songs, and pop songs, I just mean like singular tracks rather than a 30-minute piece of music. But the way he connects them, especially, in Ghost Dances, I think some of the most moving parts of that dance are the silence, the tension in between those movements. But Chris has such a unique vocabulary. I referenced the first time I worked with him was when I didn't get to work with him in Rooster. And that's because it takes time to learn his vocabulary. He has his own technique that it takes time to learn. And the second time that Chris came and I was in the company, I again didn't get cast, and I had to go and knock on the door and be like, "Hi, Mr. Bruce, would you mind if I learned one of, and so that's the only reason I was in the room for the original cast, is just because I asked to be, the third, fourth, or fifth cast, just to learn the vocabulary of that movement, because it is unique. It's its own thing. It's its own way of moving, a lot of lateral bending, and it's constantly, you're using your weight to connect all the movements. You're constantly falling, rather than a ballet dancer, we're so used to being in control. And in Chris's movement, you're constantly using your fall to connect to each one, and he is always asking you to fall more and fall more and fall more. And when a dancer falls, he's like, "Yes, that's it. You almost got it." So it is, in that sense, all of his ballets speak with the same vocabulary, and he has such the similar skill set, but they all have their own unique personality for sure.
Do you have a favorite, any of you?
I love Rooster because I'm a huge Rolling Stones fan, so just the music and the movement with the music.
As much as I love Hush, it's very special, holds a very special place in my heart because I feel very lucky to get to do it. I would have to say it would have to be my first one, which was Ghost Dances, just because of the memories I have of that first studio experience of working with him. He wanted the lights off, it's no phones allowed. You are very in the elements with him and when you're working with him, and just that first time held so much special. It's very, very, very special to me that I think it's my favorite for like the memories of working with him on that one.
It's tempting to say, I guess can I say two? Because there's one as an audience member and one as a dancer. And I think as an audience member, my favorite one is Ghost Dances. When I first saw the Houston Ballet DVD that also had Ben Stevenson's image, and what was the other dance of Christopher Bruce's? And it's escaped me at the moment. When I was in the dormitory and I was in the school, we watched that thing until it was maybe a VHS, I'm not sure, or a DVD, but we pretty much burned that thing to the ground. We watched Ghost Dances so many times when we were in the school. So that dance, to finally get to dance it, be a part of it, was like, a career-defining moment for me. But as a dancer, his ballet Swan Song was an extraordinary experience for me. A level of storytelling and an experience of the story happening to you in a way that I had never experienced before, where if anyone hasn't seen it, there's one person who's the victim or the prisoner, and there's two guards. And the guards sort of torture him with tap dancing. Also physical partnering, but the interrogation is all happening through soft shoe tap dancing. And so they're dancing around with a cane, and then you're responding with tapping with your feet. But that's just a dance that when you dance it, you feel like you've really lived it. You feel that the dance happened to you. So that was probably my favorite to perform.
Excellent. All right. So the last ballet on the program is Pretty Things. One thing that I just thought some people in this audience might find funny is that I was in the elevator at the end of last week with some of the younger company members that are in Pretty Things, and I asked them about their relationship to to David Bowie music prior to Pretty Things, and I said, did you listen to David Bowie before this piece? And all three of them said no. So I think, I have not yet seen a full run, and I'm sure I'm gonna love it, but I think at the very least, we know that this ballet introduced a new generation of dancers to David Bowie, which is great. I know, I guess you just talked about Rooster and that you have both danced to pop music before, but you don't always and you don't normally. So can you talk a little bit about dancing to this music, dancing to David Bowie?
Well, I think David Bowie has such like a wide catalog of different like styles, and I think Trey has done like such an amazing job at like really portraying his lyrics, and his lyrics are quite like abstract and avant-garde. Like there's a song in particular, Little Wonder, that I read the lyrics the other day and I was like, I don't really understand what this means at all. But I feel like dancing to pop music kind of adds like another layer, because we're usually dance to like instrumental music, and so like the way the music sort of makes you feel is different than when you actually have like lyrics sort of like also guiding the movement in addition to the instrumental aspect going on in the background. And I feel like this ballet, it like kind of goes like this in a way, with like, it starts with like almost his like 80s, and then it goes to glam rock, and then it's his like experimental music, and then like it ends in like a soul song with us all dancing together. So it's like each movement sort of has like its own different, I would say, like feeling and style. And I think the songs that Trey picked really showcases like David Bowie's like large catalog of style and music. And yeah.
You were saying that you think Trey does a good job of showing the lyrics. Do you think his movement is created by the lyric, not by the lyrics, but created to illustrate the lyrics? Is it driving the movement, do you think?
I feel like in some of the songs, yes, for sure. Like the song Ziggy Stardust, I feel like really is sort of driving the movement. That it's primarily a solo that Charles is dancing to, and I feel like the choreography is really driven by the lyrics. And I feel like also that song also kind of like is like a good portrayal of the piece as a whole, because it's sort of like about like the egotistical side of being a performer. And I think that song sort of captures that. Yeah.
When I listen to music personally, lyrics aren't the first thing that jump out at me. And maybe that's because I spend most of my day listening to music and working to music. They don't have lyrics, right? Like maybe that's just a part of who I am. But in the ballet studio, like in our process, we don't have like we don't work with sheet music. We don't have time to sit around and study. We send out the lyrics, but we'd be in the process and we'd be dancing, and then Trey would be like, "Can you put that one on when he says arm? Can you do it on that?" And then okay, we're like, and then we'd be walking back like, "Did you hear arm? I didn't hear arm. Did you hear?" And then you'd be dancing and listening, because we learn it, in the moment. So he's like, "Here, try this step, and then put it to this music." And so you're doing so many things at the same time that I found it really hard to then, he'd be like, "Put this on this word," and I'm like, "When was that?" I found that a big challenge, but I think he does a really great job of bouncing back and forth between using the lyrics and not using the lyrics, because it's a tricky thing. You don't want to be too literal. You don't want to be too on the nose about it, because that can also happen. I think Christopher Bruce is probably influential to Trey in that sense of how he interprets lyrics, how he can use them as a suggestion, rather than just like, here's the shapes of the words. It can be a big temptation, but I think Trey does a really good job of going in and out.
Touching on them, letting them inspire without, doing a show and tell.
But sometimes then it is extremely literal, intentional, and strong. You know what I mean? So then, but that you're not doing that all the time, so it doesn't have the same so it doesn't lose its value.
So we talked a little bit about how Elo's ballet is really over on the abstract side of the continuum, and for a contemporary ballet, Hush is closer on the narrative side, without an actual story, but definitely character driven. Where does Pretty Things fall on that continuum?
I feel like it's quite abstract, but could also be like probably more towards the abstract side, but still kind of character driven.
Yeah, I mean, Trey just arrived today. His flight landed at 3, and then came to our last 2 hours of rehearsal. And I think the dance is still finding its way. I think it's still kind of growing into itself, and it probably will for the first couple times the dance is performed. It still grows, and it's the dancers that dance it sort of find the life within it. And Trey said he's like, I've tried not to look at the videos too much. I've tried not to visit it too much because I want to look at it fresh, so he can have the the audience's experience with the ballet. And I think he has new ideas, and I think he has some different ideas. He has thoughts. He talked a lot about, in that dance talk, he talked a lot about, or in the movement to us, he talked about like a baby being born and discovering your body, discovering your ability to move in the first movement. And he's also talked in the studio a lot about kind of narcissism and the love of being on stage. And Bowie, I think in these fabulous jackets, like you can see like that element of being a performer and loving being in the spotlight. So there's thoughts woven through the movement, but I don't think there's not a strong narrative that's driving us through. And I think whatever is there is still evolving.
And that you can imbue it. I hear you saying that you can imbue it with you, and Chandler can imbue it with him.
Sure. I mean, I'm learning a new part for one section because one of the dancers is no longer here. And I haven't worked with Trey on it until today, so I didn't really know what the part was about. We were sort of interpreting it. We're watching the video, and the dancer's not here for me to ask, hey, what was Trey thinking on this? And then Trey's reaction was, here's what are you guys thinking? He asked us the first thing, what are you thinking? And we were like, well, kind of. I said I'm trying to be in the moment through each step. So there's like narrative of this step, but then this step doesn't have a narrative, and this one does. I'm just sort of in the moment through each section. He goes, well, let me tell you what I'm seeing and what I want you to drive. So he's using what he sees coming out of us to inform what the movement is about and where we should be taking it from now, which is I think a nice thing when working with a choreographer.
Is he making changes? I mean, it has been 2 years.
I mean, we kind of just did like a run today, and then worked maybe for like 30 minutes or so after, and I think he wanted like a second to like sort of digest. So I do think there might be changes. I mean, even just in the one note, just our intention behind some of the steps, he already sort of made a change. But so far, I mean, we'll have him again tomorrow and for the rest of the week and until the premiere. So I feel like there might be some changes.
I mean, if you watch the video from dress rehearsal, which was a Tuesday about 2 years ago, if you watch that video to the dress rehearsal on Wednesday, there were a lot of changes. Actually, on stage, I mean, you remember that afternoon? Yeah. And we were like, oh my, like, that's rare for us, at least in our process, for a choreographer to be like, okay, I'm gonna redo that part now that I've seen it on the stage. So we were working on stage, re-choreographing, so we can only reference one video because, he the piece is that malleable to him. So we'll see. We don't know. We may get a lot of changes this week.
I kind of think that's the beauty of like all these pieces, is that since we've left them and now we're kind of like redigesting them and like putting them back in our bodies, they are different, and that's okay. And it's actually, you can tell each of these choreographers, I mean, Jorma's not here yet, but I'm sure when he does come, he will make changes, and that's because they like the pieces to evolve with life and the things that have happened to us. Everyone's very different over the last 2 years. I feel like I'm in a way a different person, a different dancer, and you can see that has happened. And a couple of times I've looked in the window at these guys rehearsing, and you can see that it is different, and it's kind of nice. It's a nice welcome change to the pieces, and it's nice to know that the choreographers are accepting of that. Yeah.
I mean, Jorma changed that whole end of the Karina and I's pas de deux that there was a picture up there of, or it was. He changed 30, 40 seconds of that just the week before we were on the stage. And Karina and I have been dancing it for about 10 years a certain way, and then he decided, he's like, I just never liked that bit, let's just, I'm just gonna redo it. And it's funny now, so we'll leave it, we left it for 2 years and came back, and Karina and I will go back to the original thing we've learned, it's just so in our bodies. And then we'll leave it for 2 weeks and we'll have to go back and be like, what was that new bit he did? It's just like, it's still not in our muscle memory yet, but we'll get there.
So we have a couple of ballets in our rep that are just men or primarily men. So I'm thinking of Clear, of course, and Azure Barton's come in. So we have experience doing all male works, but I wonder what it's like for you to be in that piece. Whether it's usually it's mixed gender and not this time.
Well, I think with these three ballets, Clear, Come In, and Pretty Things, they're all extremely different. Like, Clear is very classical, and then Trey's is sort of more on the, contemporary side, but maybe more in the middle, where Come In is, on the contemporary side. And so, I guess, the relationships that the, sort of men have with each other and in the group is very different in every ballet, I would say. And I think it's also with some of these ballets, it is male-on-male partnering, which is something that we're not used to. And so trying to go back and sort of learn how to be partnered is always a challenge. And then also partnering with someone who is also learning how to be partnered can also be a challenge. So it's
Especially when they're the same size as you.
Yeah, exactly. So they're all three very different, but I feel like it's always a very different energy to dance in an all-male ballet, and it's always, I always love doing it.
I would say there's something about this one, and I don't know if you feel it, Chandler, but I feel like as a male in ballet, I think there is a special camaraderie that we all have, and that we've all lived the same experience of growing up doing ballet. And that's unique, right? As a social dynamic, as a challenge, whether we've left home or whether we were going through high school, doing ballet, harder and easier for some of us, or so there's just something very Billy Elliot-esque of when we are just all jamming out in this dance, where it feels like we are in the safest, where it's all these guys and it is okay, and we are just dancing our socks off, and it's so fun. And I don't know, there's just this element of camaraderie and not safety, but but it does feel like this safe space where we're all just
I belong here.
Yeah, and we're all just letting go in this piece. And Trey is asking us today, he's let go a little more. It is, he said, imagine it's 2 a.m. and everything's getting a little crazier.
Yeah.
It is a party piece, and there is that element of just fun that we're getting to have in this piece that I think is really special. Where we're all cheering each other on, and each dancer is has their moment to shine and bring out their own personality, and we're all just in the back just cheering them on and loving every second of it. So I feel like there's a special energy in this piece with all the guys sharing it.
Definitely.
Are you a little jealous?
Little is a huge understatement. I am massively jealous. I would love to do a piece like this. But I think it's important. I feel like through classical ballet, the women, we get our moment that we get to be a group of women commanding the stage. It makes me think of Shades, Swans, where we are creating the entire ambiance that sets an act of a ballet, and we're in charge. So I think it's really important that the men of the company get to feel that, and they don't have to do it in point shoes and tutus and be a bird on stage, and that's fine. I think we each have that ability, and it's also really nice to sit in the audience and witness it as well. 2 years ago, I watched every tech and both dresses of it, and I was glued. It was so wonderful to see the men dance in a safe space and just look so creative and out of control in a controlled way. We don't always get to do that because we're so worried about, I need to be on blue here, and my pinky is here, and I blink, and then I smile, and it's hi, you're there. And it's just you could just tell it's like the cares are gone, and it's like I'm just here to dance, which is really lovely.
That seems like a good time to transition to question and answer. I will bring your attention, obviously we have costumes here, to the Bolero jacket that's between Bridget and Connor, and just say that take a good look at those, because while they all wear the same, I think you can see that, they all wear the same tights at the bottom. They each, Bolero jacket has a different male portrait. So there's a Picasso and a Chagall, I think, and it's all woven into the fabric, and it's not, I guess I was gonna ask you guys, does that inform your characters at all? Did he talk about that, or?
I don't think so.
It's just a design element.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that it's just, I think it's a great design in the sense that Trey was talking about, like being a performer. What is that like? Like, why do we want to do this? Why do we want to be on stage? Why do I want to be in a spotlight? Like, what in us brings that energy about? And I just think to have famous artists or famous artwork on our jackets, to just sort of kind of a common thread there.
And the portrait, which is such an intimate, it's just that person in the painting. Okay, I'm going to open it up. For those, there are some people that are joining us via live stream. So you're welcome, if you haven't done so already, to put your questions in the chat. But I would, as we always do, if you say your question and give me a second to repeat it into the mic so everyone can hear, then our panelists will answer it for you. So who's going to be brave and first? Yes.
So I've watched you guys for a long time, and it looks like you are repeating dances, so learning all the secrets, right? So I've watched all of you guys. But tell me how long it takes you to learn something that you did not know. Do you watch tapes like you're talking about, or does it take a couple months? Or because Connor, you've done this for like one dance for 10 years, and you have to change 30 seconds, But so if you don't know a dance, because I see programs repeated, oh, there we go again, look what they're doing. I think the public doesn't always know that. When I bring friends to the ballet too, they don't always know that, you guys are rehearsing this, but you've done this before, and you've done it before that. But so if there's something new, how long does it take? Just educate everybody.
So there's, the question is about how the dancer's learning process. If it's a ballet that they've never done before, how long does it take them to do it? And if it's the question's mostly aimed at works that we've done before that we're bringing back. But I think it might be interesting to hear too, sort of like when it's a brand new ballet as well. So learning.
Go ahead, Chandler. No, I would say, the common structure we have is if a stager is here and a dance is already made, they will come in for about 2 weeks. And they will throw all the material at us, and then they'll leave, and we'll try and make it look good. That's, sometimes they're here much longer. Depends on how many people we have in town at the same time staging different ballets, so how many hours a day they'll be able to work with us. But I say if we have uninterrupted attention, it takes about 2 weeks to learn a ballet and have it enough that you're not going to forget it. Because as I referenced before, we don't sight read, we don't have any reference. Like, you just have to memorize everything. And there's not a helpful notation or a time-efficient way to notate things to help us remember it any better either. So I'd say a couple weeks, depending on the work, of course. Different works have a different level of detail. If there's more ballet steps in there, then it's a lot easier to communicate. If there's the steps that we're doing every day in class, and there's the standard French vocabulary to describe what you're doing, that's different. But if we're doing, say, like a rite of spring where you have Stravinsky counts and structures of music to learn, as well as a abstract style of movement, that could take a lot of time. As far as repeating a dance, I never feel like I really can memorize a dance until I've done it twice. The first time, and then we'll go back to the video and we're like, how'd that go? But then if I've done it twice, it's like, now I'm gonna know that dance for the rest of my life. For some reason, like the music comes on and now it's just there. And I just had that recently with Jules. We had done it once before, and I felt like, granted it was 10 years, but I felt like I had to be taught it again. But now I feel like I'm gonna hear that Diamonds music and my body's gonna be like, what am I doing? I feel like my body will know it even though I won't be able to remember it.
great.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you find this more interesting, exciting to work, to do a new piece where the choreographer is around to tell you what he would like and find your expression in it, compared to the classical ballet where there's already a choreography and a vocabulary that you're just repeating again and again?
So I'm just going to make sure I understand the question, that the asking about when it's a contemporary choreographer, what is the difference between that and when they're telling you the intention behind the movement as compared to a purely classical piece that maybe you've had experience with since you were a young dancer? Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I mean, it's really different per choreographer. Sometimes a choreographer comes and they don't have a story yet, and they'll just kind of give you movement, and then they'll kind of see what you put to it might dictate the story. And other times we'll have choreographers come in and they clearly know what it is that they want to do, and they'll be very upfront with you from the beginning because they don't want you to start to affect the movement in any way that's not true to their image that they have of wanting it. Which is a nice change for the way our minds work, instead of being like, oh, I know what Gamzatti does, and I know what Giselle is, and I know this. But even when we do classical ballets, our staff is very good at reminding us and breaking down the characters of what it is we're portraying, so that way it doesn't look, I hate to say it, but like we're bored. Like we know what we're doing. They reawaken it and they make it alive again for us. But it's always a new challenge when it is something completely different that we're not used to. I don't know if you guys think back to Elapse, when we had our antler reindeers and the leaves were blowing on us, and that was like there wasn't necessarily a story, but there was a really clear like energy that she wanted on the stage, and that was like a really good challenge for all of us, especially because we had just done Giselle. So it was like such a really clear flip for us, and portraying different stories with different movement.
Yeah, with contemporary work, I would just add that like a lot of choreographers keep things pretty close to their chest in the early stages of the process, because they don't quite know where they're going to go, right? Like you don't know if, I just think, and having experienced this myself, you don't want to walk in the room and be like, the piece is about this, and then you make a piece and you're like, is it about that? Was I successful in that? And I think with Elapse, that's a great example where Disha, I didn't feel like she really sat us down and said, hey, this is what this work is about, and this is what it means to me, until we were really close to the premiere. There was a lot of visualization, right? There's a lot of cues for our physical language, but not a, hey, this is what I want to come across in this piece, until we pretty much were done.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to be able to see Pretty Things in dress rehearsal right before things shut down. And when I saw it, the thing that really struck me was the physicality. I mean, it's like you guys are sprinting constantly the whole dance. Are your bodies conditioned well enough coming into this, or do you have to be more conditioned?
The question is about the sheer physicality of Pretty Things, and are the dancers, how are they feeling after, okay, Connor, you want to take that one?
Still recovering from my rehearsal this afternoon. I'll let Chandler talk about it.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it's like when we finish that piece, especially just the last movement, like the energy of everyone just like really builds up. Like I come off and like my face is like purple, and it takes me like the rest of the rehearsal to like really get any color back in my face, because we are just like running and lifting each other and throwing ourselves around and like just having fun. So definitely, like, I feel like I have to do other physical things to make sure that I can push through and keep the energy throughout from the beginning to the end.
If you go in, if there's been a rehearsal for that piece, and then there's another rehearsal after that's not, and you go in the room, it's clearly 5 degrees warmer in the room, just because of like how much they've been doing. And the girls will walk in and we're like, this was Pretty Things. And we're like, the air is thick. It's like, whoa, it's like, it's a lot. And then they all walk out and they're drenched head to toe. Like it is a full workout for them. And, but I mean, that's what makes it great. It's wonderful.
It's one of those pieces that you go to your maximum. I would say 1-1 is in that category as well, and that regardless of how hard your part is, you have to invest all of yourself into it. So even if your part is that much easier, that just means you're going to invest that much more energy into the piece. And so Pretty Things is very much like that. Like at the end of the dance, you are just giving it everything that you have left. So at the end, we're just all flat on the floor, kind of dry heaving. Yeah, it's a lot. It's been a process to get back there, but I think we're feeling fit enough. And just like every new dance, you have to repeat it, and you have to find your way, and you have to find when to put the gas on and when to push it, when to pull it off. And that's at first it's always daunting. You're like, this is gonna be impossible. I can't do this every night. And then you repeat it, and third or fourth run of it, then you start to be like, okay, I can still talk. I have my breath. So like it's possible. But I remember our first run, my legs were giving out. I had a guy leaning off, and he sort of lowers to the floor, and my legs just buckled, and I just went with him, and I was like, I'm sorry, because I just didn't have it. But even just a week later, we're getting there.
Yeah, it's the feeling. I feel like the feeling I have after doing that piece is just like, I want to do it again, but I don't think I would be able to do it again because it's that physical.
Yeah.
So over the last 2 years, you guys did some wonderful videos of the city, which I thank you for. How much, it's a very different process, right? Where you're doing little cuts, you're working to a camera. Was that a difficult transition, or were you just looking for anything to do, while we're all isolated?
The question is about the video work, the film work that the dancers created last year, and how, especially coming off the question about Pretty Things, which is lots of bodies in the room at 90 miles an hour for the entire run of the piece. Obviously, film work is really different. What was that like for you all?
It was definitely different, but I think it was a welcome different. We all wanted and needed something to do. I think I can speak for all of us here, where being stuck at home was probably one of the worst things for us. We're very much a community and a family of dancers where we like to come to the studio, be in clash, push each other to work hard, do this, So it was different but needed, but it was so odd working at such a specific focal point, right? We're so used to the audience. We're just that is, there are moments when we're on stage where you will hone in and you have a very much a clear focus, you're looking here, but at the same time, there's this sense of grander projecting out to the audience versus you would do it and it would be no, lower your chin, the camera's here, because we're and it's no, you have to go right to the camera. So it was definitely a new skill set that I think a lot of us had to learn if we hadn't experienced that before.
Yeah, we needed purpose, right? Our being, our whole lifestyle, our job, it was stripped from us for a while, and I do think it served as that. But I used to think, I did some acting when I was younger. I did commercials and I did some extra stuff or small little roles on TV shows and stuff. And I used to really like that when I was younger, but now I just don't think I like it because there's such a start-stop nature to film, and that we run Pretty Things today. The rehearsal process is not always fun. It's kind of hard, and it's a start, stop. Well, let's do it again. Okay, do it this way. I love the process, but film is very much like that. Sometimes you're okay, we'll just do those 2 steps. Okay, do those 2 steps again. Let's do those 2 steps again. And so you never get to that emotional place where you're really kind of lost within the music and the movement. So that, I don't know. I could, I'm glad we're back on stage, to say the least. But, it was nice at the time, but my relationship to film is really different now, and I have a lot more respect to actors in the sense of how to stay in the moment in that sort of stuff, because it's such a start-stop process. Oh, wait, we got to fix the lighting, and then you're standing around for 20 minutes. Now go. That's, especially as a dancer, we do so much work to prepare our bodies to be in just the precise condition at the right moment, and film just had none of that. It was so, I don't know, I just love being in the moment and living on stage and getting kind of lost and carried away by all of that I don't think I was ever able to feel with doing film projects.
Yeah, and you also don't have the energy from the audience, which I feel is also a really big driving force to performing. And so you have the camera and you have a couple people behind the camera, and while I still feel like I have to portray an energy to the camera, and that I know that there is going to be an audience in the future, and sometimes maybe even more people will see this than they'll see a stage performance. It's just like a different feeling and just vibe in general, because even though I don't see the audience directly when I'm performing, like I still feel their presence, and that definitely affects me and how I am on stage.
Well, I think that's a great place to stop, because we are all, like Connor, very glad to be back to live performance, and we're really looking forward to seeing you at the Wortham next week or the following week for the Pretty Things program. Thank you to my wonderful panelists, and thanks to all of you for coming out.